Roman Dodecahedron is remarkable and unusual, because there's not many more than 100 known to exist.
In a field somewhere in England, a volunteer finds a bronze object that should not have existed. It had 12 perfectly shaped faces on it, almost untouched by time, and it clearly looked like it had been carefully and deliberately buried. Silence spread across the excavation site because this wasn't just a mistake in history. It was a contradiction. For centuries, these objects were seen as nothing more than curiosities. But a discovery at Norton Disney forced scholars to face an unsettling truth. The Roman Dodecahedron, a mystery nearly 2,000 years old, raising questions for over 300 years. Now, slowly, it has started to become clear that Rome didn't ignore this artifact. It erased it, but the question still remains. The same empire that documented everything, why did it stay silent here? To know the full truth, make sure you watch the video till the end. Before moving ahead in the video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you can see more videos like this first. The real mystery starts from here. This is called the Roman Dodecahedron. The name may sound a bit heavy, but in reality, it's a small bronze object about the size of a tennis ball. But the moment you look at it closely, you realize this is no ordinary thing. It has a total of 12 faces, and each face is a pentagon, meaning it has 5 sides. So far, that's fine. But the real strangeness begins when you notice the holes in the center of each face. Every face has a circular hole, but no 2 holes are the same. Some are big enough for a finger to pass through easily, while others are so small that only a pencil could fit. The interesting thing is, if this were a tool, there should have been some standard design, but here everything is intentionally different. Now look at its corners. At every corner, there are small round knobs. These don't seem like mere decoration because every real dodecahedron has them, and they are made very precisely. In some, they are cast together with the body, while in others, they are attached separately. That means they were necessary, not just random design. And the most surprising part, this entire object is hollow from the inside. There's no mechanism inside, no moving parts, not even a scratch to suggest it was used like a machine. From the outside, such a complex design, but inside, completely empty. So much detail, such perfect balance, different sized holes, and still no clear sign of use. It doesn't look like any normal tool. It feels like it was made for a specific purpose, but that purpose is still unknown. That's why this object remains a puzzle even today. If you think it's just a strange shape thing, then look closely at its structure because the real surprising part is hidden right here. The technique used to make this dodecahedron is called lost wax casting. In simple words, first, a full model of it was made using wax. Then it was covered in clay and heated so the wax could melt and flow out. After that, molten bronze was poured into the empty space. Now think about it. If even a small mistake happened, wrong temperature, bad timing, the entire shape could get ruined, cracks could appear, or the design might not form properly at all. But the surprising thing is that the real dodecahedrons that have been found are so perfect that even after 2,000 years, their shape, edges, and symmetry are almost exactly the same. Some pieces are so well balanced that if you place them on different surfaces, they stay perfectly steady without falling. Now, this isn't something a normal tool really needs, but here so much attention has been given to balance and symmetry as if it had a special meaning. Then comes the material. This object is made of bronze, which is a mixture of copper and tin. Today it might seem common, but in that time it was quite costly and valuable. To make it, you needed a proper trade network, skilled craftsmen, and most importantly, time and resources. This wasn't something a random person could just sit and make as a hobby. Now just think about it. Such a complex technique, such expensive material, and such perfect finishing. Why would anyone do all this for something random or for daily use? If it were just a toy or a simple tool, there would be no need to make it this perfect. But here effort is visible in every detail. Every angle looks carefully planned, so it's clear this was not an ordinary object. Behind it, there was a big investment of time, money, and skill. And when something has that much investment, its purpose must also be something equally special. Distribution mystery. From everything we've seen so far, it's clear that this was not a common object. But the real mystery becomes even deeper when we look at where it has been found, because its distribution itself raises the biggest questions. Roman dodecahedrons have mostly been found only in areas that were on the edges of the Roman Empire, like Britain, Gaul, and Germania. These were places where Rome ruled, but the people there were not fully absorbed into Roman culture. Old local beliefs and traditions were still alive there, and surprisingly, it is in these same regions that this object keeps appearing again and again. But now comes the biggest twist. In all of Rome, in Italy, the very heart of the Roman Empire, not not a single dodecahedron has been found till today. Just think about it. The empire that is believed to have made it doesn't have even one example in its own core. Not in the capital, not in major cities, not even in the wealthy regions where the most development happened. And it's not just the location, the quantity is strange too. Till now, only around 130 dodecahedrons have been discovered. Now, if you know Roman history, you would know that Rome was a master of mass production. They made thousands of identical items, whether coins, utensils, or weapons. Their whole system was based on standardization. But here, the case is completely opposite. Despite such an advanced design, these objects were made in very small numbers, and that too only limited to specific regions. This doesn't match the Roman pattern at all. So the question arises, if this was a Roman object, then it should have spread across the entire empire. It should have been found everywhere. But that didn't happen. It almost feels like it was intentionally limited to certain places. Or maybe it was connected to a culture that Rome didn't fully want to accept. And the same thing has happened with the Roman dodecahedron. Over the years, scholars have come up with many different ideas to explain its purpose. At first, these theories sound quite convincing, but as soon as you go a little deeper, they start falling apart one by one. The first one is the rangefinder theory. According to this, soldiers used to look through the holes of this object to estimate the distance of the enemy. Sounds like a very smart idea. By aligning different sized holes and looking at the target, they could calculate distance. On paper, this theory works perfectly, but the real problem starts right here. If this were truly a military tool, then every dodecahedron should have had standard hole sizes so that measurements could stay consistent. But the reality is completely different. Every object is unique, but the size of the holes, the distances between them, everything keeps changing. There is no calibration, no uniformity. And the biggest point, till today, this object has never been found at any military site, weapon setup, or near-range tables. If it were a military tool, it should have been found along with those things. But that has never happened. Then comes the candle holder theory. Some people suggested that maybe candles were placed inside it. At first glance, it sounds like a simple explanation. But the moment you think about it practically, the theory falls apart on its own. Many dodecahedrons are open at the bottom, which means if you pour wax into them, it would just drip straight out. And even if somehow a candle was placed inside, there should have been signs of burning, like soot, heat marks, or discoloration. But none of that is found on these objects. After that came the weaving tool theory, which became quite popular on the internet. According to this idea, the object was used to measure the thickness of wool or thread, especially for making gloves. Different sized holes could have been used to create different thicknesses. It sounds logical when you hear it, but here too there's a major problem. Roman weaving techniques didn't even require a tool like this. They worked in completely different ways. And most importantly, why would such a complex and expensive bronze casting be made just for a simple textile tool? If the job was so basic, it could have easily been made from wood. On top of that, till today, no wool fibers or cloth traces have ever been found in any dodecahedron. So, one by one, and every theory sounds correct in the beginning, but fails when faced with actual evidence. Every explanation has some major flaw. Most dodecahedrons were found by hobby metal detector users in fields and random places where we could tell what the object was, but not where exactly or how it was found. And this missing detail was the biggest reason the mystery couldn't be solved. But in 2023, what happened in a small village in England, Norton Disney, completely changed the direction of the story. For the first time, a dodecahedron was discovered during a proper scientific excavation. That means layer by layer digging was done, everything was recorded, and the exact position of every object was noted. This is called archaeological context, and this was the biggest game changer. Now, this was no random find. Now, we had the full scene, it like a carefully documented crime scene. During the excavation, not just the bronze object was found, but many other things around it too. Pieces of Roman pottery, 3rd century coins, iron tools, and the remains of an old building's posts, which were likely part of a villa or a workshop. So, it was clear that this was an active site where people lived or worked. But the most important detail was that it was found in a sealed context. In simple words, this object was not just dropped or lost randomly. It was deliberately placed at a specific spot and then carefully buried under the soil. The upper layers completely sealed it, which allowed us to know exactly when and with what objects it was buried. Now think about it. If this were just a tool or an everyday object, why would it be buried so carefully like this? No one hides their hammer or utensils in this way. This method points to something else, like it was necessary to hide it, or maybe it had to be placed underground for a specific reason. And this one point completely changes the whole story, because now it's clear that this object wasn't lost. It was deliberately hidden. And when something is buried with so much care, there's always a reason behind it. Either it's very valuable or very dangerous. Behavior and usage pattern. Now that it's clear this object was intentionally buried, the next big question is, how was it actually used? Because if it were an everyday tool, it should show signs of use. But here, the situation is completely the opposite. All the dodecahedrons that have been found show almost no wear and tear. Their edges are not worn out, the holes are not smoothed down, and even the knobs are still sharp and clear. And now, if something is used again and again, whether it's a tool or an instrument, it naturally starts showing marks over time. But here, there's nothing like that, which means this was not something people used daily. This brings out a new pattern. Maybe it was used only occasionally on special occasions, and that too under controlled conditions. It was taken out, used, and then put away immediately. This kind of behavior is very similar to what we see with ritual objects, things that are not used all the time, but only at specific times and places. Now, let's talk about locations, because they are just as strange. Many dodecahedrons have been found in places that are not considered normal, like riverbanks, crossing points, or the boundaries of settlements. These are not random spots. In old Celtic beliefs, such places were called liminal spaces. In simple words, liminal spaces are places that exist between two worlds, like a river, which separates one side from another, or the boundary of a village, where one world ends and another begins. These places were considered spiritually very important. It was believed that here the distance between worlds becomes the smallest, like between the living and the dead, or between humans and some other force. Now, if these objects are repeatedly found in such locations, it cannot be a coincidence. It clearly points to the idea that they were used for something beyond just the physical, something spiritual or ritualistic. So, on one side, we have an object that looks complex but shows no signs of use. And on the other side, we have specific locations connected to ancient beliefs where it is found. Like together, these two things point in the same direction, that this was not an ordinary tool, but something used at specific times in specific places for a specific purpose. Roman silence. Because the Roman Empire was not the kind that simply forgot things. They kept records of everything: laws, taxes, military, trade, even people's daily habits. But about these rare and complex dodecahedrons, their official records are almost completely silent. No clear description, no mention of use, just a strange kind of silence. So, the question is, was this just an oversight, or was something intentionally hidden? This is where Roman laws come into the picture. At that time, Rome was quite strict about magic, divination, predicting the future, and secret religious practices. There was a specific law, Lex Cornelia, under which things like sorcery, unauthorized rituals, and fortune-telling were considered crimes. People involved in such activities could even be punished. Now, just think about it. If an object was connected to these banned activities, what would happen? It wouldn't be discussed openly. It wouldn't get a place in official records. Instead, it would either be seized or quietly removed. In other words, it would never have an official history at all. And this is exactly the pattern we see here. The same thing is happening with the dodecahedron. The object clearly exists, keeps being found again and again at archaeological sites. But in documents, there is not even a proper mention of it. This doesn't feel like simple absence. It feels like intentional silence. Some researchers believe that these objects may have been linked to rituals that Rome tolerated, but did not want to officially accept, especially those practices that came from local cultures like Celtic traditions. On the outside, people followed Roman laws, but deep inside, they kept their old beliefs alive. So, it's possible that the dodecahedron became a symbol connected to these hidden rituals. And for Rome, this could have been a problem because Rome wanted control. It wanted order. Anything outside its system would have felt like a threat. So far, we've talked about its shape, history, and different theories, but the real game changes when scientists started thinking that more than how this object looks, what really matters is how it behaves. In other words, what happens when it is exposed to natural forces, especially light. And for this, researchers created exact 3D replicas of the dodecahedron. Some were made using modern 3D printing, and some using traditional bronze casting methods so they could match the original properties as closely as possible. The goal was to observe what happens when this object comes in contact with sunlight. And this is where things get interesting. When these replicas were placed in direct sunlight, they didn't just cast random shadows. Instead, the light passing through the holes created perfect geometric patterns. The rays coming through the different-sized circular holes formed circles and shapes on the ground. And as the position of the sun changed, these patterns slowly moved as well. This wasn't just a simple shadow. It was like a moving light system. Some experiments were done on special days like the equinox, and when day and night are equal. On these days, the patterns formed were even more precise. Many models created almost perfect pentagon shapes on the ground, which slowly rotated throughout the day like an invisible clock was running. And from here, a new idea starts to appear. Could this object have been a kind of primitive solar tool? A device that tracked time or special days, not through numbers or markings, but through the movement of light and shadow. In old Celtic traditions, equinox and solstice had great importance. When to start farming, when to harvest, and when to perform rituals, all of this depended on these timings. And if this object helped identify those timings, then it means it wasn't just a tool. It could have been a sacred timing device. And if you connect it with those liminal spaces where it is found, the picture becomes even clearer. An object placed at a specific location, used on specific days, and working through light. And for this, researchers created exact 3D replicas of the dodecahedron. Some were made using modern 3D printing, and some using traditional bronze casting methods so they could match the original properties as closely as possible. The goal was to observe what happens when this object comes in contact with sunlight. And this is where things get interesting. When these replicas were placed in direct sunlight, they didn't just cast random shadows. Instead, the light passing through the holes created perfect geometric patterns. The rays coming through the different-sized circular holes formed circles and shapes on the ground. And as the position of the sun changed, these patterns slowly moved as well. This wasn't just a simple shadow. It was like a moving light system. Some experiments were done on special days like the equinox, and when day and night are equal. On these days, the patterns formed were even more precise. Many models created almost perfect pentagon shapes on the ground, which slowly rotated throughout the day like an invisible clock was running. And from here, a new idea starts to appear. Could this object have been a kind of primitive solar tool? A device that tracked time or special days, not through numbers or markings, but through the movement of light and shadow. In old Celtic traditions, equinox and solstice had great importance. When to start farming, when to harvest, and when to perform rituals, all of this depended on these timings. And if this object helped identify those timings, then it means it wasn't just a tool. It could have been a sacred timing device. And if you connect it with those liminal spaces where it is found, the picture becomes even clearer. An object placed at a specific location, used on specific days, and working through light. Now think about it. An object that is rare, deliberately buried, and carries traces linked to death and rituals. Can all of this really be just a coincidence? So far, whatever we found was truth buried under the ground. But the real shock came when a faint trace of it appeared in historical records as well. This story takes us to a 12th century Latin manuscript, a document that remained in archives for years, but no one took it seriously. The manuscript was old, damaged by water, and many parts were not even readable. But when modern imaging techniques like ultraviolet scanning were used, some words slowly started becoming clear. And what came out surprised the researchers. In that text, there was a mention of a strange object, one with 12 faces with crown-like projections on every corner. Now, if you think about it carefully, this description almost perfectly matches the Roman dodecahedron. 12 faces, knobs on every corner. This wasn't some vague reference, it was a very clear description. But the strangest line was still left. It said that this object was used to hear the voices of stone sleepers. Now, this may sound poetic now, but its meaning could be quite deep. Some people interpret stone sleepers as a symbol of ancestors or the dead, those who are described as sleeping beneath the ground. So, this object wasn't just something to look at or hold. It may have been part of some kind of communication or ritual. And now comes the biggest clue. Burial instructions. The manuscript mentioned that this object should not be kept in the open, but should be buried at a specific time when the stars move in a certain way. Later astronomers decoded this line and found that it wasn't random at all, but pointing toward a specific astronomical event, like a lunar cycle or an eclipse pattern, which in ancient times was considered sacred timing. Now, just connect all of this. A single object whose exact description appears in a medieval text, whose use is linked to the dead, and which is supposed to be buried at a specific astronomical time. And the most interesting part, this was written hundreds of years after the Roman era, which could mean that this knowledge never completely disappeared. Instead, it survived through oral traditions passed from one generation to another. People may not have spoken about it openly, but deep inside, this knowledge stayed alive and somehow reached the medieval period. Until now, everything was based on guesses and theories. But what happened in 2025 gave this mystery a solid scientific direction for the first time. An international research team, experts from Britain, France, and Israel, used advanced techniques like spectroscopy and isotope dating on these dodecahedrons. Now, it wasn't guesswork anymore. It was science speaking directly. And the first shock came right there. The metal composition of these objects does not match Roman standards at all. The bronze used in them contains trace elements that are linked to Celtic metalwork, not Roman factories, which means the object we've been calling the Roman dodecahedron might not actually be Roman at all. Then came the isotope dating results. These showed that some dodecahedrons, especially the one from Norton Disney, are about 150 years older than the Roman occupation. Now, that's a huge difference, because if this object existed before Roman rule, then it cannot be a Roman military tool or a later invention in any way. For the first time, the whole picture flipped. This object was not Roman, but belonged to the culture that Rome had conquered, the Celtic civilization. But the real shock was still to come. When scientists analyzed the residues inside it more deeply, they They found traces of calcium phosphate, which is usually linked to bones. And not just that, there were also chemical signatures that match human cremation, meaning traces of burned human remains. Now pause and think. What does that mean? Could mean that this object was not just symbolic, but was actually used in rituals where human remains were involved. Maybe it was used in ceremonies where ashes, blood, or herbs were combined in some special process. Now all the pieces start fitting together. A rare object, intentional burial, liminal locations, ritual residues, and now even scientific proof pointing in the same direction. So what once looked like a mystery is now taking a clear direction. That this was not a Roman tool. This was not a simple object. This was a Celtic ritual object, a part of a civilization whose beliefs and practices Rome may have understood and perhaps even feared. And maybe because of that fear, it was slowly erased from history. The truth is, museums and institutions did not take this object seriously for a long time. In many places, dodecahedrons were simply kept on display without any clear explanation. Some even stayed in storage for years, as if they were not important at all. And yet, this is the same object that challenges every theory. And if you look at the timeline, you'll notice that before 2020, there was hardly any major institutional research project on it. Just think about it. Such a rare and mysterious object, known for over 300 years, and still no proper large-scale study. One reason could be that working on this topic was risky for archaeologists, because this object doesn't fit into any established category. It's not clearly Roman, not a simple tool, not a decorative item. If a researcher studies it, getting funding becomes difficult, publishing papers becomes harder. Could even affect their career. In a way, there was a hidden bias at work. If something doesn't fit the system, just put it aside. But now, slowly, that silence is breaking. New researchers, independent analysts, and volunteers are trying to piece this puzzle together. And the picture that is forming is becoming quite clear. This was a ritual object used at specific times and specific places, and possibly connected to communication with ancestors or the dead. I am the biggest point. It belonged to a culture that Rome conquered but could never completely erase. So when we look back now, a clear pattern starts to appear. Rare objects, intentional burial, Roman silence, and now scientific proof, all pointing in the same direction. Rome didn't ignore it, suppressed it, because some knowledge doesn't fit into a system, and some things are considered too dangerous to be left out in the open. And in the end, one question remains, the biggest truth of this whole story. If an empire that recorded everything could erase something like this, then just imagine what else has been removed from history. If you enjoy such mysterious and mind-blowing videos, make sure to subscribe to the channel and press the bell icon so you don't miss any updates.